Welcome to the quick guide to the private common law irrevocable ecclesiastical trust, otherwise known as the 508c1A trust. So, this vehicle is designed specifically for asset protection and completely eliminating taxes. If you're new to this community, or you're still doing your research and exploring which type of trust and which direction is the best way to go, then welcome, and there's plenty of resources in here to check out. But this video is going to be an all-encompassing explanation, and I would recommend that everyone, even people who are more advanced, it's always good to start with the fundamentals. So let's dive right into it. So when we look at the elites of this country, they're clearly all using trusts. The political families, the Kennedys are, they have trusts, and that's how they've avoided many judgments against them and many business, turbulence over the many decades that they've ruled this country. The Jenners, they're rumored to have their own 508c1A, and they are able to donate, earnings and write off, money on their taxes. Trump is the same deal. He clearly can, shield himself from taxes in many different ways. He has an entire empire that should be taxed in a number of places, but yet none of them hit his tax return except for a measly $650. So there's something going on there. Since a trust is a contract, it is conceivable that with the right language, a super trust could be drafted that completely avoids all tax. So I, made my way to the center of this maze first, starting with my days as a chess player years ago, because I learned to think ahead, think strategically. I was training under multiple grandmasters, and at my peak, I was a co-national champion. And in particular, from there, I made my way into the world of finance when I met Gary Kasparov at a private training session at the hedge fund billionaire offices of Stan Druckenmiller, who was the lead trader for George Soros on the Quantum Fund. So these are some of the most infamous financial characters in history for what they did. And when I was young and saw what they were doing, it sort of inspired me at the time to understand what that world was. And I dove into the, understanding derivatives and trading and all kinds of different complex financial products. And eventually, after Columbia University, I ended up as an insurance broker, working in wealth management teams to try to secure assets for not just my own family, but that of different clients. And in seeing like all these different, big teams of lawyers and accountants and brokers and trying to coordinate things, it really didn't work. And it was always a different thing every time. And it was always up to chance. And, it was extremely stressful. And that's when I started to realize the hoax and the lie, the lies that really build and construct this matrix. And as I dove deeper and deeper to the center of asset protection, the center of that maze led me to discovering the category of so-called common law trusts. So the 508c1A trust that we use is ultimately a copyrighted ecclesiastical trust that's designed to eliminate taxes per Internal Revenue Code 508c1A. It's fully compliant and legally written, and the government can't tax or regulate this entity because it doesn't fall under its jurisdiction. And this trust is the foundation for operating under the common law and achieving true financial freedom under Jesus Christ. So, this trust is unique for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a part of the 501c3 section of the code, which is the nonprofit section of the code. 508c1A is just tricky because it's a subsection of that. And so we'll get into that distinction later, but every accountant and lawyer in the matrix knows what a 501c3 nonprofit is. 508c1A trusts fall under that category too. They're all nonprofits, but the difference is they're automatically nonprofits as soon as they're created, as soon as the contract is notarized. So you do not have to apply and reapply every year to the IRS to maintain that status. Another key is there's just zero tax liability and with this non-reporting status. So you just don't pay any taxes and there's no taxes incurred inside this vehicle. Also, trust assets are not subject to eminent domain, foreclosure, or any kind of court orders whatsoever. Because same thing, They use the common law right of contract as well as a number of other factors, and they're able to create this bulletproof shield where no other outside attacking parties are able to penetrate it. So one of the first key words in this lengthy, private common law irrevocable ecclesiastical trust is the word private. And part of how we define that is it's a contract that anyone can create themselves and write privately. So the education that we're going to have is going to help you create that contract, and we'll get into more of that later. But that is ultimately why a privately written contract has so much power versus the publicly written statutory business contracts that are given to you by the government. And that is a very key distinction there. Private doesn't mean that you have to keep it a secret. We actually want certain parties to know about what's in our document, but private, it means that it's not under the public jurisdiction of the government. So another key factor in this private common law trust is that it's irrevocable. And what does that mean? It means this is a business entity that cannot be modified, revoked, or amended by outside parties. So the trustees maintain control at all times and can make ongoing changes to the trust operations as they see fit. So this is confusing to many people because if you've listened to typical matrix programming and a lot of these big shot lawyers and accountants, they're all saying this crap about irrevocable trust being this vault that you can't touch. And once things are in there, they're just stuck in there and that's it. Well, yeah, if you have a shitty irrevocable trust, maybe then that's the case. But if it's, a private common law irrevocable ecclesiastical trust as we do it, then you have full flexibility as long as you are in the role of trustee. And so this creates this ecclesiastical jurisdiction on the sovereignty of Jesus Christ, and the trustees will control all assets, investments, and banking at all times. So what does the IRS say regarding 508c1a? So when we look up this particular part of the code, and this PDF is going to be the link on school, so you can download this for yourself and follow these links, right to where they are publicly that anyone can Google. And, basically 508c1a is confusing intentionally because it's in these special rules regarding 501c3. So once again, 501c3 is a nonprofit section. Every lawyer accountant knows that. But there's a subsection now of special rules. Okay. And when we go to 508c1a in particular, it's saying that subsections A and B shall not apply to churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or associations of churches. So it's basically giving a list of entities where some of the previous rules, which state that you have to apply for that status, but it's saying that these list of entities don't have to. So all these other rules basically don't apply to these, small list of entities right here. So here's the question: how do we qualify under, this category? There's clearly a list of things, but what is the proven pathway that I've found in order to qualify and fit under here? It's through the path of an ecclesiastical convention, and that's what this trust is written as. All these other ways, these integrated auxiliaries, churches, people say there's PMAs and all kinds of other stuff floating around out there, but I haven't seen, a consistent, provable, repeatable path to do any of these except for a convention, which in our case, in other words, is a trust. And when we define convention, it's an agreement between parties. That's it. And so when we look at, this informal agreement of parties, which is formed on the basis of a contract, that is also the definition of what a trust is. And when we then go and look at trust law is the oldest law in this country. It's how this country was even formed, right? What is our Constitution? It's the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation. Declaration plus articles equals trust. So our very Constitution is a common law trust. But when we look at more, up-to-date evidence to support the fact that these trusts exist, this is, one key area on a government website from the Small Business Administration. And again, you can look this up as well. And the last line here is the key. Such organizations are not required to apply to the IRS to receive tax-exempt status, see 26 U.S.C. 508c1a. So it's basically saying that in the case of these PPP, and EIDL loans, there's certain organizations that are tax exempt without having to apply for it. So it's admitting it right there in the government's words. So clearly there's a way to do this, but here's the next question is how do we construct our own trust that qualifies here? And so, a lot of people, when they're constructing a trust and they're looking at these statutory lawyer trusts, and really when they're considering any type of tax strategy, most of these accountants and lawyers will lead you to very complex, big diagrams with write offs and all kinds of different things going on here and there. And when you do something complex, you're more likely to have intentional omissions, improper deductions, all these different things that are considered tax evasion and are illegal when you're jurisdictioning yourself under the government. But what the IRS admits is any attempt to reduce, minimize, or alleviate taxes by legitimate means is permissible. So, as we've already shown in their own code, there is a way where there's a subsection in the nonprofit code where you can have that status without having to apply for it and you're just exempt. Okay, so now how do we do that? So, the assets that are held in this trust, just to really be clear, they have zero capital gains. You can grant unlimited amounts of the asset into the trust. And because it's a grant, it's a donation and it's not considered a gift. These are non-taxable, write-offs that are considered 501c3 contributions. And there's also zero capital gains on growth or sales of any assets in the trust. So you can do stocks, bonds, currency, Bitcoin, other types of crypto assets, real estate, buying and selling of businesses. I mean, anything a normal type of business entity, LLC, can do, this trust can pretty much do without any kind of worries. And it's even easier because now you're not having to track all the minutiae and the accounting and the paperwork behind that, but you can just do some simple bookkeeping and know that all the events inside the trust are non-taxable. So let's go over a quick example here. So this is a real estate portfolio business, but this could be any type of business where you have a net taxable income of X amount, in this case 1.2 million. And here the estimated tax rate is 37%. Realistically, it would probably be higher, in the real world, but for this example, it's just over a third, $444,000 in taxes due, and no asset protection. So that's typical just business off the shelf. Now, when you're moving to the bulletproof trust strategy, in the case of the real estate business, all that real estate would be quit claimed into the trust. So the trust would own it, and then the trust would be running the business. But any type of other business, same thing. You could just move those business accounting and operations over into the trust, run it directly out of the trust. And now, very simply, that business received money from all the clients, and the taxable business revenue, boom, just drops to zero. 100% tax reduction using this strategy. So, as far as how you can get started doing the same thing, Liberty Aid Academy was where I got my education, and I would recommend everyone do the same as far as getting themselves educated and also getting the step-by-step, process exactly how to do this, all the documents, all the supplemental things that you're going to need to do it, as well as going into much more advanced things on, the nuances around real estate, on maximizing business credit and funding for these trusts, and other sorts of advanced spiritual topics as well. So everyone who's here and gotten to this point, you're clearly doing your research, and maybe you're trying to just get the foundation review if you've already done this, but most of you are going to be in the phase of doing your research. And if that's really the case, any type of education, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. You're going to pay in the amount of time and confusion just bumbling around on the internet, trying to piece together things in very dark and murky rabbit holes. Or you can just go to Liberty Aid, get their bundle for an investment of just under $2,500. And for me, when I did it, it was a complete game changer and it completely revolutionized not just how I manage my own assets and my family does, but it just changed my business and how I really view this world. And so I couldn't recommend it enough. Now, for those of you who want to get started at Liberty Aid, but have a head start and a discount on the bundle, that's where you can help support our community by getting the Bulletproof Blueprint course that is located in the Classroom tab. So in this course, this is kind of a deeper dive where we're going to talk more about my investment philosophy, and especially in these turbulent times, as this empire we live in collapses, and all these different crazy things are happening in markets and different assets, traditional investment paradigms are going to be turning on their head, as we speak. And things that have always worked are not going to always work into the future. And so that's why some of the topics and things that I go deeper on are going to be really valuable. There's also the Trump the Money System course that's from Liberty Aid Academy themselves. And this is like a beginner course they created to help kickstart you on your way. You're also going to get exclusive access to recordings from all future live streams and Q&A sessions from this group. And finally, you're going to receive 15% off the Liberty Aid Academy Trust Bundle. So when you're ultimately ready to get started with your own trust, you're going to receive a discount on that. And to take this starter course here in the Bulletproof Retirement Classroom, it's only $247. So it's a very small investment. The discount you're going to receive later down the line would completely cover that. And it's going to allow you to hit the ground running and just get success quickly. Because there are many people that get stuck, in the weeds. Many people are just stuck in this, research, hell of doom, where they're just kind of perpetually researching and never doing anything, confused by all the different trust demons out there. So this is going to save you a lot of time and, at the end of the day, save you money. So look, you're going to be at a crossroads right now. This really is that moment in the matrix where it's the red pill or the blue pill. Are you going to go back into the matrix? Are you going to listen to the public agents, the accountants, the lawyers, the Jin AIs? Are you going to listen to, all the other naysayers, the family, the friends that will tell you not to do this, the painter who comes to your house that tells you not to do it? I mean, I've heard the craziest stories. Everyone will literally tell you not to do this, but this is that choice where if you do it, it's gonna, and if you do follow the proof of the others that have done it in this community and over at Liberty Aid, it's going to open you to an entire new way of doing business. And it's going to change your life for sure. You're not going to be filing taxes. Your business, is going to be far more streamlined. So in certain ways, you are going to be escaping the matrix. And this step, this conscious step of, ending that contract with your birth certificate and, taking one that's better than that, that's a trust that's irrevocable rather than revocable with the government. Now it's irrevocable with God. This is how we consciously stand up for our rights. This is one of those steps. But I want to finish with a warning to everyone. Just because this contract is a door and a pathway, it is not an easy path, and it's not for everyone. And I don't say that facetiously, like as some reverse psychology technique. This is really a very difficult path because psychologically, you are now doing something that almost no one around you is doing. And so that puts you already at odds. And then as you go further and further into this work, your energy and your time is freed up in many ways. Like for myself, I haven't filed taxes in years. I don't even think about that. I earn income from multiple sources and it just goes into an account in my trust. And then I just manage it and spend it the best I can, protecting, my family and the people that I love. But now when your energy is freed up from the matrix and in certain ways, that energy is now going to go towards increasing challenges and serving Christ and in serving your family and in serving, your community. And so it doesn't get easier. This path really gets harder in many ways, but that education and the knowledge that you'll have will make you more prepared to deal with it. So in a similar way to the matrix, even after he took the blue pill, or I should say the red pill, it wasn't a pleasant experience. Reality was very much an acquired taste and a very bad taste at times with the kind of difficult things that you'll have to experience. And so that's the same with this path. In certain ways, as we've discussed in this presentation, it will absolutely streamline your life and make it simpler. But it's not going to be easy. And because many people come to me and they're like, oh, if this was so easy, why wouldn't everyone do it? But that's the thing. Psychologically, spiritually, and many other ways, this isn't an easy path at all. So if you're ready to do this, jump in the Bulletproof Blueprint course. You can also book a private consult with me. And, I look forward to steering many of you right the direction. And you can also jump on one of our lives. So I really, hope to be interacting with you in the future. And for those of you who want to DIY it or go somewhere else, I wish you the best of luck.